For today's lesson, we will be reading Little Red Riding Hood. And this edition is written by Candace Ransom. This edition has a Espanol version, a Spanish version as well. It's actually in dual language. So that is one of my resources for ELL learners if I were to have them in my classroom. So students will have had an introduction to classic stories and the importance of chronological order previous to this lesson. And then after this segment, students will continue to explore classic stories and compare their significance, and the complexity of the stories will progress as the unit progresses. And the stories previous to this one were simpler for them to understand so that it is a cohesive progression. So for context, this lesson would take place in the middle of the unit. All right. Now, let's begin to read Little Red Riding Hood by Candace Newsom. Candace Ransom. I said Newsom. Candace Ransom. So can anybody tell me, do they know anything about Little Red Riding Hood? And if you do, can you share with the rest of the class what you think this story might be about? All right, let's begin. Little Red Riding Hood. A long time ago, there lived a sweet little girl. She loved to visit her grandma. One day, her grandma gave her a special present. Ooh, what could that be? Kind of maybe think, what are some special presents that grandmas would typically give, or older people? Maybe a batch of cookies or a sweater. Can we guess by context clues what maybe she's going to get from what Little Red's going to get from her grandmother, and by looking at the picture? All right. She gave the little girl a red wool cape with a hood that she had made. The little girl liked her cape very much. She wore it everywhere. So now we know why the story is called Little Red Riding Hood, right? Because she wears this hood. She even wore her cape to bed. Soon everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Your grandmother is not feeling well." Little Red Riding Hood wanted to take a picnic to her grandmother. "Be sure to stay on the path through the woods," said her mother. Little Red Riding Hood promised that she would. So now we can see she's going to visit her grandmother. We can see this is her mom. And we can tell because Little Red is leaving this setting that she's probably going to a new one. So does anyone think that this house, is going to be where the story takes place? No, right. So this wouldn't be the place that the story is going to take place, because we can see that she's leaving and she's walking out and she's going to her grandma's. So she's going from her house, now she's going to her grandma's. So she got her cape. Now her grandma's sick, and she loves her grandma a lot because she gave her this cape and she's done a lot of things for her. So now she wants to go and visit her grandma. All right. Little Red Riding Hood skipped through the woods. She was very careful to stay on the path. After a while, she met a wolf. All right, and what do we think? Do we think that this wolf character is going to be a good guy, or do we think he's going to be a bad guy? What do you think? I think he is also going to be a bad guy, because from what we know in classic stories, wolves and other animals like this are usually representative of bad guys, as in the Three Little Pigs, the big bad wolf. And Little Red, since we already know she's a sweet little girl, they said in the beginning she loves her grandma, so we can tell that he is going to be the bad character, and she is going to be the good character. And if we want to use big terms, this is called a protagonist and this is called an antagonist. "Hello," said the wolf. The wolf seemed friendly. "Hello," she said. "Where are you going, little girl?" asked the wolf. "I am going to visit my grandmother," said Little Red Riding Hood. "She is not feeling well." "Where does your grandmother live?" asked the wolf. at the end of this path. The wolf wanted to get to the grandmother's house before Little Red Riding Hood. "I'll gobble up that old lady and that little girl," he thought, "and the tasty picnic, too." So we were right, huh? This wolf, he wants to eat Little Red and her grandma. And that's not gonna fly, is it? That's not gonna fly. So what is Little Red gonna do to save her grandma? Or is she gonna find out what the wolf's plans are? We'll find out. "Look at all the pretty flowers growing in the woods," said the wolf. "Why don't you pick some for your grandmother?" "Good idea," said Little Red Riding Hood. When she turned to pick some flowers, the wolf ran away. So it looks like, what can we tell from this picture? We can see that the wolf, she said her grandmother's house was up the path. We can see that he's going up the path, and this is Grandma's house. And since the main focus of the story is about Red going on an adventure to her grandma's house, or going on to a visit to her grandma's house, we can assume that this here is going to be the main setting of the story. All right, is the backyard of Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother's house and the house itself. The wolf crept quietly inside grandmother's house. He tiptoed into her bedroom. Suddenly, she woke up. When she saw the wolf, she screamed, "Help! Help!" So we can tell that the grandma's pretty distraught, right? She's having a pretty tough time here. She's confused and scared. The wolf grabbed her and pushed her into the closet. Then he locked the door. So right now, and at this part in the story, we're probably thinking, something bad's gonna happen. Something bad's gonna happen to Grandma, and something bad's gonna happen to Little Red because of the wolf. But in other classic stories like this, we know that there's a solution. So what could the solution be for this story? The wolf put on a nightgown and cap. He hopped into bed. He pulled the covers up to his hairy chin. Little Red Riding Hood knocked on the door. "Grandmother," she called. "Come in, my dear," said the wolf in a high voice. Little Red Riding Hood went into the bedroom. Her grandmother looked very strange. "Grandmother, what big ears you have," she said. "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf. So now, and as we've mentioned in the beginning of the unit as well, when two characters are talking back and forth like this, we call this dialogue, and it's very important and often provides a lot of meaning and context for the story. So it's very important to pay attention to what the characters are saying to each other so we know what the story is about. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "Grandmother, what big hands you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to hug you with, my dear." Uh-oh. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to eat you with," cried the wolf. The wolf jumped out of bed. He tried to grab Little Red Riding Hood, but she leaped away. So we can see now the wolf, he's trying to get Little Red, but something's gotta happen here. The wolf tumbled out of the window. He was never seen again. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother pounded on the closet door. Little Red Riding Hood let her out. "What happened?" said her grandmother. "I went off the path to pick you some flowers," said Little Red Riding Hood. "I think you learned your lesson," said her grandmother. "I am just glad we are both safe." Then Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother enjoyed their best visit ever. The end. So we can tell from this story that the theme, or the overarching theme, is to listen to your elders, right? Listen, do what you're told, don't walk off the path to pick flowers, because when Little Red did something she was told not to do, she ran into trouble with the wolf. So that's what the overarching theme of this story is. And we know from other stories similar to this one that these classic stories in our culture are meant to teach golden lessons like that. All right. And so I would like all of you to go and add some vocabulary words to your journal. New vocabulary words that you discovered in this book. Particularly, we can go cape might be a good one because her little Red Riding, her hood is so prominent. So cape might be a good one to add. Wolf might be a good one to add. Maybe just any prominent vocabulary words that meant something to you in this story. All right, so add those to your journals. And then after that, we're going to meet back at the carpet and we're going to make stick puppets. So we're going to cut these out. So here's Little Red. Here's Little Red and the Wolf. Here's the grandmother. And then here's another story, or character that wasn't in this specific story, but he's in a lot of other Little Red Riding Hood retellings. So he's not absolutely necessary for the retelling of this version, but if you want to include him, you're more than welcome to. And then this page is our setting, and this is where this will be used as the background, and you will make these puppets, and we are going to retell the story of Little Red Riding Hood to see in groups to see how well you remember the chronological order.